Thank you very much. And Henry, welcome.
Thank you, Nisbet.
Sorry you got called away urgently this morning, but I'm glad we were able to get you back for a few minutes today. So sure. Thanks again for doing this. So I'm not sure if you saw the earlier conversation we had this morning about China, but one thing I wanted to ask you was there's a sense after the Party Congress that people in China who belong to a community that I think you're associated with, who promote reform and opening up, stronger links with the outside world, and so on, that those people have less influence now than before. Either there's fewer of them or they're not listened to as much. Would you agree with that? Do you feel that yourself?
Well, I think China now actually started, after this 20-party Congress, basically they are trying to find a new path of Chinese modernization. And I think that is really very important. I think, that China has lifted 800 million people out of poverty. That's a priority for the government. And now they are thinking about what about 300 million migrant workers? And what about, we have built a 400 million middle class. What about remaining 1 billion that not joining the middle class? So I think that, this new consensus that trying to shape is really want to avoid that the deglobalization or the populism, nationalism, or disparity or polarization that maybe we've seen in some other countries. So I think China probably is doing the right thing, is that trying to get all the people on board and then towards the goal of China's way of modernization, which I think it has a lot of its uniqueness. For example, now China actually has a hybrid economy. You have a 60% private sectors that hires about 80 to 90% of the employment of the people, and they have another 20% SOE. Does all the social responsibility, public welfare, or all those disaster relief, or parachute 40,000 people into Wuhan to rescue the COVID patient, and things like that. All the dirty hard jobs that SOE is providing to the general public. And then you have another 20% multinational, which hires about 40 million people in China, and just Foxconn alone hires about 2 million. And they're doing all the great thing of, supporting almost 50% of China's import-export. So I think, we're trying to find a path that's suitable for China. And this is really, I think, currently Party Congress is calling for the new path of China's way of modernization.
So do you think how much should people read into the language of these party documents? Kevin Rudd points out that in Xi Jinping's speech, he used the word security 90 plus times, and the words reform and opening up are hardly mentioned, which is quite a reversal from past work reports from previous Chinese presidents. Is that a significant change, or is China turning away from reform and opening up?
I don't think China is turning away. I think there's. I think that probably Kevin was referring to the early days of when Deng Xiaoping was trying to push the reform. At that time, reform was not a common consensus, and then you have to really mention dozens of times or hundreds of times to build up the consensus. Now people are reaping the benefits of reform and opening up, and it's become a reality and become what's the daily life already. So I think the new consensus you have to really, for example, China's way of past the modernization and then common prosperity and things like that. But I understand the party also documents, Party's Congress report also mentioned many times of security. But you have to think about, we are living a much changing world now, and because China was surrounded by those, Quad and AUKUS and IPAF and Five Eyes. I mean, Chinese company, there's about 1,000 Chinese company on the U.S. sanction list or watchable list. China is having U.S. Unilaterally decoupling the semiconductor sectors. And then China hasn't really retaliated, or China hasn't responded. But what about China mentioned a bit more security concern in their report? I think that is natural. I mean, I don't see any problem with that. Basically to say we have to live in peace, but we think of a danger. As the Chinese saying goes, I think then we have to really, prevent the war, or conflict. But let's, really prepare for the worst. But I'm sure China was forced to do that. China, of course, wants to have a more peace and prosperity, and then that's where I think it comes right. It's emphasized quite a bit of security because they are surrounded by all those new alliances. security and military alliance, where China is promoting economic alliance like CPTPP, China joined RCEP, China signed Kai with European countries, China is doing BI, and China even said BI and B3W can work together. So I think that China is really like to see more economic alliance rather than we are seeing so much, security alliance that's bumping up and the surrounding China, and then China feel unsafe, and then they have to call for more safety.
Right. And what can be done about that? I mean, President Xi mentioned at the Party Congress, as he has often, that China will never give up the option of military force against Taiwan, even though it prefers peaceful reunification. But as long as China doesn't take that option off the table, you're going to see the U.S. providing more arms to Taiwan. You're going to see Japan funding their military more U.S. forces in the region, things like AUKUS. How do we square the circle? What can China do to sort of ease tensions with the West to prevent this buildup?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mistrust. Of course, I think U.S. has been practicing ambiguity on Taiwan, and those based on 3 communique. I think that kept the status quo quite well. And what we were seeing is that in the last number of years, of course, first of all, there's trade war, there's the sanctions, there's no high-level communication on the face-to-face level, and then we have seen there's a parade of high-level congressmen, senators, including the third highest ranking officials like Nancy Pelosi, visiting Taiwan, and that's really a violation of this 3 joint communique, that no official ties that are stipulated in the communique, and that's the basis of China established diplomatic ties with 181 countries. So that principle has been broken. But you can see, you check the pattern, every time China was really being responding. Whenever there's a high-level visit, or there's a huge military coups pass through China, afterwards doing something. Even for the Nancy Pelosi, they were talking about, trying to do something during his flight, but no, she landed in Japan. China started military exercise just to show the anger and the protest. I don't think China wants to rock the status quo either, because China really wants to see a peaceful reunification with Taiwan, and that's still the #1 priority. That's on top of a 20th Party Congress report. They still prefer, of course, peaceful reunification. But of course, if separatists are really getting independent, or there's a foreign influence that really out of control, China reserved a last resort of using force. But that was not really the #1 choice. So I think that we have to calm down. I'm very glad to see the high-level meeting that President Xi and President Biden had at the Bali 2 days ago. But I was really appreciative that President Biden even come out to say he doesn't see an imminent attack on Taiwan from China. He said that one of the 4 questions, he said one of them like that. And then that should send a huge signal to the world. All the companies have plan B now, and they're trying to say what happened of Ukraine, and what about attacking Taiwan, sanctions on China, or the pulling out of China. But now President Biden said, no, don't worry, China is not going to attack Taiwan imminently. So I think, we should have more dialogue. I'm glad to see Secretary Blinken and other senior officials will go to China probably going to U.S. Let's resume dialogue. Let's put a floor, put a bottom there. Let's elevate a bit. And then I think in the end, U.S. and China has to work together for the global multilateral system, for the United Nations, for global security. We have to, upgrade the system. But China doesn't want to change the system. Let's upgrade and include China, play a bit more role there. I think that should be okay. I mean, even for Taiwan. I mean, in the end, peaceful reunification. I remember years ago, there's millions of Chinese mainland tourists flooding to Taiwan. There's Taiwan selling a lot of products to mainland. They still enjoy the biggest surplus. I mean, they can integrate in the end. I mean, they share the same language, culture, heritage. I believe they can find a way to work out.
Now, speaking of the Biden-Xi meeting, Henry Kissinger earlier in this conference said that this was a good start, but that the 2 sides needed to go beyond the low-hanging fruit, really take some concrete steps to solve tougher issues now, to build on this positive momentum. Where do you see the most opportunity for them to do that? Is it in the South China Sea? Is it over Taiwan? Where can the U.S. and China take some concrete steps to reduce tensions?
I think there's many things we could do. For example, South China Sea, it's already, has been a disputed area. But then, China can work with all the ASEAN countries in the neighborhood to find out the joint way of exploring. So I think that is not a big issue. if China can work out something with ASEAN, they are now joining the best relations. ASEAN is China's largest trading partner now, so I'm sure they can work out something out there. So U.S. maybe can promote the peaceful settlement there rather than every time as a navigation military exercise there. So that's something. I think Hong Kong is calming down. I mean, where all the business are back, I think that's not going to be a hot issue anymore. And I think also on the climate change, China of course has to work with U.S. And then that's where we can always work together, because not just number one, number two emitters of carbon dioxide has to really take a good example on that, and China can do that. And then also, I think that why can't we, that I was wrote many times in different op-eds, that why not World Bank, AIIB, ADB, I mean, all those development banks headed by U.S., Japan, China work together. Why not B3W and Belt and Road work together? So I think all development banks can really set a good example to do that, working together.
Right.
But also, I think Global South is really a big problem. I think China proposed at this time that we should get African Union into the G20. Let's get the G21 now. And then so we can really, US and China and EU can work towards the Global South and work together. So there's many things we can work together. There's so much, big task, climate change and, this crisis of pandemic and also energy crisis and everything. So I think we have all the good wills to work together. I mean, particularly China is willing to work with US, as President Xi said many times. And it's just we can't every day wake up as another sanction coming up. There's another entity list lined up. There's another alliance formed up. There's another strategic alliance aimed at China. So we don't want to live in that kind of reality. We want to really work with US. I mean, with EU. I was even proposing let's have a G3. China, EU, and US work together for the Global South. Let's do something more noble and work with UN. China is willing to also help on the Ukraine crisis. I even wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying China could help. I'm sure, China is the third party not involved on both sides, and China, by sitting there, could really, make things much easier for Putin and for Ukraine probably to solve this crisis. I really think there's a lot of things U.S. China can do together. Given we fundamentally we don't have much conflict there anyway. I mean, this China doesn't want to take over U.S. We don't want to be the world police. I mean, China is a continental country. U.S. is a marine country. China never traveled that far. China never colonized any place or sent soldiers anywhere in the history. I mean, China even expedited 7 times away of Columbus, but never occupied any territories outside China, continental China. So don't worry. I think the DNA in China is not expansionist. There's no fight. There's no expansion intention of Chinese side. So I think we have to be assured of that. And then we need more dialogue and more understanding.
Okay. All right. On that positive note, I think we should leave it there. But thank you very much, Henry, for taking the time to do this. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.